So how I like to run my sessions is I like to spend 30 seconds at the start. I mean, each person gets 30 seconds to quickly announce anything interesting that they have up and coming. So feel free to announce any events that you have coming, any initiatives that you're running. You know, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire someone, you can take the time to announce as well. So 30 seconds, you can go off mute, or you can type in the chat box anything that you want to share with the group. You can make it a simple intro if you want as well.
Shin, should I go first? Nikki from Futurepreneur here.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey everyone, this is Nikki from Futurepreneur here. Futurepreneur is a national nonprofit organization that supports entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs between the age range of 18 to 39, helps them start their businesses, particularly in financing and mentoring startup businesses that are just getting started. So if anyone's interested in financing or needs some mentorship to help get your business off the ground, then let me know. Contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Nikki. Anyone else? Kenneth is sharing Startup Grind Richmond. Kenneth, do you want to go off mute to talk about any upcoming events you have?
Hi. Am I on?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenneth, Chapter Director for Startup Grind Richmond Chapter. We are a entrepreneurship community where we are all basically entrepreneurs, founders of startups. We're sharing and connecting and educating entrepreneurs from around the world. Richmond is part of 600 chapters from around the world. So Startup Grind, basically, we want to invite successful founders, entrepreneurs to share their stories, and so other people that are starting their startup or in the process of running their startup can learn from those experiences. So we do monthly event, and now that all the events are online, we actually do it more often, and we are going to have a couple more workshops with Shin coming up this month and next month. So look out to our future events, and feel free to join us. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else want to share? I can quickly share something as well. I want to quickly announce that I'm actually running a new and interesting hackathon coming up in June. It's called the Do Good Business Challenge. And the idea is it's a virtual hackathon, but it's not only for tech companies. So you can also join if you're running a service company, if you're running a food company, things like that. The idea is the business that are participating are businesses that will do some form of good in the world. And there will be some cash prizes at the end as well. So if you're interested in learning more, I can share the link in the chat. Sure.
My name is Sanjana. I'm actually 16 years old. I'm hosting an organization called Your Words Matter to Us, which basically includes a writing program, an open mic program, and a bi-monthly magazine. I've also signed up for an app business contest, and I've created a mental health app, and once the contest is over, we're going to get started with collaborating with other organizations and then seeing where that takes us.
Cool. Do share those details in the chat as well. I'd love to check out the app. Great. Anyone else want to share? Or else we can move on. All right, I think I will move on. Let me jump back into screen. And let me just pull up our chat. Great. Key outcomes, I hope that we all will walk away from today having a clearer understanding of what are some of the risks and rewards involved in running a business, giving us some perspective in terms of what type of business is suitable for you. And what I mean by this is the biggest ones I typically see are entrepreneurs who are looking to start either tech companies, which are more, either tech companies which are more venture scale. So they plan on eventually raising capital from investors. And then sometimes we see more what we call lifestyle companies, where it's more maybe highly profitable, small companies, but not with the intention of raising money from investors or going global anytime soon. So just kind of talking about different perspectives, different companies, what is more suitable, what are some of the risks involved, and maybe quickly addressing some of the challenges around or probably even opportunities around starting a business during a recession, which looks like it might be happening as well. So that's the goal for today. So maybe a quick question for the audience, and feel free to type out in chat. I just want to get a sense, what do you all think it feels like to be an entrepreneur? Especially if you're not an entrepreneur, what do you think about entrepreneurship? Roller coaster ride. Business builders. Be your own boss. Oh, that's a favorite one. Exciting. Have control of your time. Cool. Super, super interesting. Endless journey. Yep. Solving a problem. Great. The be your own boss and control of your own time. Those are two big pieces that I will address later as well. So good stuff. Solving a problem, definitely.
I think a lot of it is about like self-discovery too. Like it's not just about the business itself. It's about like how do you grow by becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. That's actually one of the main reasons why I am so attracted to entrepreneurship myself. Definitely the personal discovery piece. So I think it's an interesting topic that I wanted to bring up today, especially in this moment in time, given what we are facing in the community right now. Not so much the COVID situation, but what you're actually seeing as a ripple effect coming out of it. You're seeing that a lot of people are getting laid off. And what's interesting there is, I've always felt that if you can't find a job, then there's also always an opportunity to create jobs yourself, or of course, become a self-employee yourself. So quickly to address that, you're actually seeing that in the existing ecosystem, there's actually it's a very interesting dynamic right now, because during the last recession, the gig economy basically did not exist. Now we're starting to see things like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Taobao, the Chinese delivery food company. So there are a lot of interesting things coming up and about. You can even do freelancing online. You can do things like go on Upwork and list yourself as a freelancer to do list building for sales. You can do web development, graphic designing, all kinds of stuff now. So there's definitely a lot of freedom, flexibility, and control. Someone mentioned the ability to kind of control your own time. So definitely, as you start to think about being self-employed or possibly even starting a company, then you do have that flexibility in place. But it's not, I would say, being a freelancer is not a perfect solution. There are definitely some pros. So you can see flexibility, more options. There's a lot of opportunities. But what you're also seeing is because there's such a low barrier to entry, you're competing alongside many, many people who have the same set of skills that you have. So it is quite difficult for you to stand out in the crowd. I see a lot of people starting marketing agencies, and it's very difficult to kind of paint a clear picture of how they're different from all the other marketing agencies. And if you can't articulate the differentiating factor, it doesn't mean that you can't survive. The core thing that I typically see with a lot of entrepreneurs is good execution is really key, but having differentiation definitely helps a ton, especially if you're trying to capture a larger market. Cons, inconsistent income is definitely one of the small things, especially from early entrepreneurs or freelancers who don't have sales background. I find that they really find it challenging for themselves to ask for money. The big other challenge as well is, of course, if you're working for yourself, you don't have benefits, you don't have job insurance, expenses, things like that. And there's of course the worry about liability as well. So what happens if something goes wrong? Are you held liable? Do you have to pay out of your own pocket? And the taxes piece as well. So you're not contributing to the larger economy. So when people start to think about what they should do, I would really encourage people to really consider, is it worth it to go into entrepreneurship, to actually start a business, or can you simply get by just by freelancing or being a gig economy worker as well? So the way I view it, I actually prefer entrepreneurship as an option, because I believe that if you actually go into starting a business instead of simply freelancing, you're actually creating a more sustainable future. You're actually creating something that's more enduring, and you're actually leaving more of a legacy. The mindset is a bit different though. As a freelancer, you're still very much an employee mindset. You're still working for someone else. The difference is that you're working on an individual basis. Yes, you manage your own time, but you're basically making yourself available to anyone. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a company, you're now becoming the employer. You're becoming the boss. You're hiring people. You're now responsible for a lot more people. You're moving from becoming a customer to a provider, right? And you're actually, someone mentioned, solving problems, delivering value, and actually generating profit. So adding a lot more comprehensiveness around that. Freelance, obviously you work for yourself. Entrepreneur, you're working for the sake of your customers, your employees, and your company. And like I mentioned, there's two of the main types. What I typically see is, I see a lot of lifestyle entrepreneurs. These are usually the ones that are more opportunistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different style. For them, it's usually about having a clear line of revenue. They want to be their own boss, like someone mentioned. They focus a lot on good processes, automation. They want to create what they call passive income. But you do have to recognize as well that there's no such thing as true passive income. There is always some amount of work that you put in for it. World changers, on the other hand, are the entrepreneurs that I typically find are the ones that never shut off. So what I mean by those are, these are the entrepreneurs that Monday to Friday, or even on the weekends, like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or even more, they can't stop thinking about their business. They're always focused on changing the world for the better in some way. They have some mission or vision that they're working towards, and they just cannot shut off. As you compare that, for example, a lifestyle entrepreneur might be someone who is running an Amazon e-commerce website and is just selling some product. So for them, they could easily stop working at a certain time. But sometimes I see for the world changers, if they have a big mission and they get really excited about it, for them, it's really hard to turn off. And they're really focused on scaling, and it's not just about the money. They really want to make a vision turn into reality as well. So, as you think about going into business, think about what kind of entrepreneur are you? So obviously, why be an entrepreneur? You control what you do and what you earn. This is one of the big factors that I find quite appealing for myself. You're not dependent on a company to pay you or promote you, especially if you come from a background where you're comfortable doing sales, finding clients, then you have a lot of flexibility around that. The challenge that I find, and I'd love to hear the perspective of the panel when we get to the panel, is I find that a lot of entrepreneurs find it quite challenging to ask for money, to actually, get their fair exchange of value. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you guys went through that experience of pricing your products and getting your first sales as we get to the panel. So other things you think about is, as you become an entrepreneur, as you start a business, you're focused a bit more on predictable recurring revenue, as opposed to focusing just purely on the flexibility aspect, where, sure, you can control your time, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that your money is going to come in regularly, so that this is actually going to become an actual career for you. Learning and growing, like Shin mentioned, there's no better way, in my opinion, to also just develop yourself as an individual, because when you try to run a business, there are so many things that you have no idea about, and you will definitely learn. So even if you don't know, you should be prepared to actually start to pick up a lot of new things. And the best part is, as you think about the greater impact, you're not just relying on other people to sustain yourself. You're not a job seeker. You're actually a provider, and you're creating the culture that you want to work in as well. And lastly, leave a legacy, right? Something that will outlast yourself and change the life of your customers. The biggest challenge that I want to quickly address is, depending on your background, I personally came from a very conservative family. So one of the challenges that I had was talking to my parents about going into business. And what I found is my parents, they always felt that business was kind of fooling around. Like, you're thinking about starting something, but you're not really serious, and who knows what's going to happen. There's a lot of risk. What I really find that helps in terms of the conversation is it's not just about fooling around. It is actually about creating change and actually creating impact. So if you have to navigate the conversation, I'm really curious to hear perspectives from our panelists as well when we get to the topic. So last slide, and then we'll jump to the panel. I just want to quickly kind of highlight the typical journey I see for most early entrepreneurs. Of course, there are exceptions, but usually what I see for someone who's starting a business, especially for the first time, is they usually start in corporate, and they start by feeling restless with their current situation. Either they feel that they are not growing enough, or they're just a cog in the wheel, or they're starting to see that, hey, there's this problem out there that I want to solve that no one seems to be caring about or solving for. And then they suddenly come up with an idea. They call that the golden egg. And usually early entrepreneurs, one of the biggest concerns that they have is they're worried about people stealing the idea, about competitors. They get everyone to sign NDAs, and then they go out and they always typically feel that they can start it all on their own. And hand in hand with that is they always overvalue the company as well. So when they start to raise money from investors, they tend to, what's interesting in the overvaluing piece is they tend to underprice their products or service most of the time, but they tend to overvalue what the company is worth. And then once they realize they can't do it on their own, they start to look for co-founders, but then they struggle, try to understand how to find the right kind of co-founders. And then once they actually launch their product or service, they're struggling with getting customers. So that's usually the typical journey. So we hope to be able to address that when we get to the panel too. So maybe let's jump right into it. I hope you guys have been thinking about questions. So let me quickly pull up the chat. I'll quickly introduce myself. I'll be your moderator for tonight. What we went through so far, it just helps kind of spark some of the questions that you might have. But just to give you some of my background, I come from about 5.5 years of working in entrepreneurship. So I used to work for Spring, which Tiffany is still with. And Spring is a social impact incubator. And while I was at Spring, I've probably worked with about 500 companies over the last 5 years. Prior to that, I come from a background in corporate sales. I used to do event management and business sales for a telecommunications company. And now I'm running this company called Classy Novel. And what I'm trying to do with Classy Novel is I'm focused on helping people develop soft skills, especially through entrepreneurship. So that's a bit about my background. I'd love to have Colby introduce yourself. And we can have the panelists.
I'm here. Hey, everyone. How are you doing?
Great.
Video on. Yeah, Colby Harder from Hungard Investments, Conti, Forte Development, and Work-Life Collaborative Co-working. So I've got a few businesses on the go. Our main business is a business-to-business, low-voltage contracting and audiovisual integration business. I actually purchased that company. That business has been around since 1973. I've been running it for close to 20 years. A spin-off of that is Forte Consultants, which does the design and technical consulting related to that other business. So they're kind of complementary businesses. And then I started Work-Life Collaborative Co-working about 6 months ago because our businesses I bought a building and we outfitted the space, and we wanted a cool workspace, and we wanted to build an environment where other businesses could work alongside us and we could share resources with each other. So all of my businesses are kind of related to each other in one way or another.
Great. Tiffany, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Shin. So currently I'm a program manager at Spring, which is how I know Chen, and there I consult with and work with businesses, startups, our social impact businesses. Before that, and still currently, I've started and run a few businesses. My last businesses were in the food industry, I had a snack food company called Kapow Now, which I ran for about 5 years, where I made healthy snack foods locally in Vancouver, and we're distributing it both nationally in Canada as well as in the US. And I also coincidentally,
I'm going to quickly mute Erin. Oh, excuse me.
okay, and coincidentally, I also am a co-owner of Coho Commissaries, which is a commissary space for food businesses. So that's kind of like a co-working space, except it's a kitchen where food businesses are able to come receive help and also start their businesses there. And my background in business has ranged anything from website and design to a clothing business, and now up to food. I'm taking a bit of a break from being head into my own business this past year and a half by working with Spring, though I am still a co-owner in Coho Commissaries.
Thank you, Tiff. Isaac and Karen?
All right, is this working?
Hold on.
Can you see us?
Hello.
Hey everyone, this is Isaac and Karen.
Hey.
We're the co-founders of Melton Sparks, and we mostly deal with product design, consulting, and workshops for education. It's kind of like a shebang of three things.
That we're still really working through.
Yeah, for sure. We met Shin through Futurepreneur. He's acting as our mentor during this this process and transition. And I'd say before this, I was working as a subcontractor for a sort of a long-term acquaintance in New York, doing circuit design for printed circuit boards. And before that, I was working with Doug Chan, the co-founder of MakerCube, and yeah. So,
I currently am the art, visual, and technologist instructor for the city of Surrey. So I still do contracts with them as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you all. So a quick reminder, everyone, feel free to type your questions in the chat as we go along. I do have some questions for the panel, but I'd love to hear what your questions are as well. If you're looking for the chat and you can't find it, there is the horizontal control panel, and you go to the More section and you should be able to find the chat box. You can also press Alt-H on PC and you can bring that up. Great. So quick question for the panel, and feel free to unmute yourself and go whenever you want to. Maybe I'd like to first hear from all of you. What made you all decide to actually go into business? What made you decide to start your own business?
I'll start. So I've actually started quite a few businesses before. Some of my first ones were in the clothing business. Some of them were in early ones were in graphic design and making websites. Some of the things that led me to start my own business were, one, I did want to take my own schedule and life into my own hands. That was, I think, initially part of what really drove me to start my own business, is that I wanted to be able to drive my own life. I also wanted to challenge myself and see, how far I could take that. Later on, as I continued on life and got a little older, the first business I started with, I was actually about 19. But later on in life, as I started forward, I realized that business was the way I was actually really going to make a change in the world. I was an arts major at UBC, English and psychology, and had a bit of a idealistic view of how the world should be. But I also found myself complaining about how the world is, and thought to myself, instead of complaining about how the world is run, I need to be part of that change. And if I see that that's the change that needs to happen, the only way that I can make that difference is if I go and do it. I go and be the leader that I want to see out there. I go and experience what it's like to create a business and run it, and be able to balance making money and treating people well. And so that was what drove me later on into business. And within my later businesses and the last 2 businesses I've had, we're really driven with knowing that, you know, if I want to see the change, I had to be part of that change myself. So I'll pass it off to the other entrepreneur.
Yeah, Colby here. I'll jump in here. So I grew up in a family where my dad ran and owned a business for my whole upbringing. So I was always fairly comfortable with it. I'm not sure, while I experimented working for other people, I'm not sure that was ever really something that would get me where I wanted to go from a personal development point of view. And, you know, so that was the first business that I got involved in. And then over time, it's really just sort of the challenge of seeing an opportunity to take something that someone needs and create a solution to that need, and accepting the fact that sometimes you fail and sometimes you succeed, and you just kind of go at it. And success and failure is never black and white. It's always somewhere gray in the middle. So I think that's an important lesson for everyone to learn too, as they're starting out, is you may not end up where you originally planned on going, but you're going to end up somewhere.
Great, thanks for sharing. Isaac and Karen, any comments?
Oh.
So I actually had started becoming self-employed due to a car accident 7 to 8 years ago. So just because I couldn't work at my previous job, that kind of inspired me to work for myself. I'd been really lucky because I ended up working in the City of Surrey community and working with youth and the arts. And that's how I ended up getting all my contacts and like my small business. Then I met Isaac, who is a much better engineer than me, and because you are an actual engineer. And we had certain collaborative projects and ideas that kind of came into fruition over the last couple of years. And we both thought it would be a good idea to start a business.
Yeah, and I think at first it was mostly a challenge to ourselves to design things and collaborate. And then we thought to ourselves, well, hey, we're making these projects and they're actually half decent products. Yeah. So we decided, hey, let's try it for a bit, and then we will we'll register, and then we'll take it more seriously. We'll get what do you call it? A business proposal and all the stuff ready to actually give a genuine try at starting a proprietorship, like a partnership. So, yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing. I want to quickly follow up on one of the comments that Tiffany mentioned, so sort of the flexibility piece, and we've heard that quite a few times during today's session. How have you all found the work-life balance piece in entrepreneurship? Do you find that you're actually having less flexibility than you expected? You're spending more time on the business than you thought you would?
I'll jump into this. It's funny because you start off thinking, okay, I want this flex. So you have idealized this. You're like, great. You know, for me, I was like, great. I'm gonna, do my work, and I'm gonna go climbing. I'm going to go hiking. This is what my life is gonna be. And then, 5 o'clock rolls around, and I'm still working. 6 o'clock rolls around, I'm still working, and then find myself probably 10:30, 11 at night, eating dinner, working. Because the truth of it is, when you first start a business, you're full in. They call it a baby for a reason. It is like a baby. You have to put that effort in for it to grow. Later on, when things are stable, you do get a bit more flexibility. If you organize it right, you can have more flexibility in your life, in the sense that you balance things out. But I would almost say, in my experience, it's put in the work in the beginning heavy, but you're almost trading off like putting in the 90 hours in the beginning, and you get the rewards later on. So it's not necessarily right away. Your friends may come to you and say, oh, you can just do your own schedule. But what really ends up happening, in my experience, and what I've seen with lots of entrepreneurs as well, is that in the beginning, your own schedule means you're working on your business with that passion, with the fervor, because you want to see it grow, and it needs that kind of intention to grow.
I'd love to hear from Colby, especially since you run Work Life, which is really a lot about balance, right?
Yeah, although you might be surprised to hear that I don't really believe in work-life balance, because I think that the whole idea of work-life balance presumes that those two things are at odds with each other. And I don't think they really should be at odds with each other. Like anything in life, you have conflicts in your life, but I'm really much more prone to believing that, you know, we only have one life, and my work is a big part of my life. My family is a big part of my life. My sports are a big part of my life. But the more I can kind of blend those together, the better. I know a lot of business people, and I don't, you know, and a lot of them live wonderful lives, but I don't think any of them would say that they did it or do it because they work less. I mean, you know, it's part of the program, I think.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. having work and life be one and the same. I find that that's a perspective that I also hold that helps me quite a bit. Instead of thinking about shutting off when you need to shut off, just, you know, seeing it as two parts of the same. So
I will also add, though, that I am a big believer also in, I mean, as an entrepreneur, or at least a business owner, I never shut off. Like, I can go on vacation for a month and I'm still thinking about and dealing with stuff almost daily. However, you know, you do also get good, or you should aim to get good at some point of compartmentalizing your life so that you can give yourself a little bit of downtime and stuff. I mean, I don't work till 10 o'clock every night. I don't grind through stuff, but, you know, because I know that if I don't get enough good sleep and all that, I'm going to be a wreck tomorrow. So that's just how I structure my time. I start early, finish early.
Yeah. A follow-on question from Liam. Just a quick question for the panel. What's the average work week? How many hours do you work a week?
I'll jump in there. I mean, in some ways, I'm kind of always working because we have a staff and team and bankers and debts and rent to pay and all that sort of stuff. So you got to think about that all the time. But in terms of actual work, I mean, I think once you're into it, you know, whether you're sitting at your desk or you're sitting on a call like this or you're riding your bike, you're still working. There's still stuff going on.
Yeah.
You know, I tell people in our case, like when I look at the overheads in our business, I remind our people this, if they're wondering why I'm cranky some days, I say, just imagine having a mortgage that's $125,000 a month and you got to show up every month and pay that mortgage. Like that's what has to happen in our case. Right. And we're by no means a big business, but by the time you pay rent, you pay people, you pay for cars, you pay for vehicles, you pay for phone lines and all that other stuff. It's a lot of money. So I think about that often.
I can give my perspective as well, because I actually track my time and I use Toggle. My average work week is about 30 hours. So it's actually less than you think. But when I say 30 hours, that's 30 hours in front of the laptop. So I do, let's say, for example, when I take my kid out for a walk, that's the time where I spend thinking and planning for the business. You know, when I'm cooking, I listen to podcasts. So I'm usually doing some sort of multitasking form as well, where I don't really count it as work. Anyone else want to comment on the hours work?
So I'm going to unmute us here, and maybe we can speak a little bit about the hours.
I'm the same way, Chin. Like I feel like even though I go and, I don't know, take out the garbage or do something else, like I'm always thinking about the business and try not to let it consume like all the free time that I have. But I guess it's really variable for us at times.
Yeah, sometimes I'll say, because our business, the general nature of our business is we registered for an R&D company. So a lot of the time when we're doing product development, or if it's for a contract and we're brainstorming for the design of a particular device, there will be an inspiration and we'll work until like 3 a.m., right? So it really can come in bursts, or it can be like a consistent thing, like for someone who has a more established business and more established duties, will do like 30, 40 hours. I've personally seen between a 4-hour work week, like Liam mentioned, to something as much as like I would say maybe 50 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because a lot of the time you have to actually record your hours, and we typically do timesheets for contracts that are paid. But it gets a little fuzzy sometimes for self-reporting our own time, because it's almost constant all the time. So unless you have a really good system, and there are some good systems that you can add to Calendar to do that, but it's self-reporting. It can be fuzzy. It can be very fuzzy. Yeah, I think that's all for now. Some words have escaped me, but yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Curious, how have you all found, how did your families react to kind of the decision that you wanted to go into entrepreneurship or starting a business? And when I say families, your parents, your spouses, how do they feel about you running your own business?
If I could quickly speak first, for my mom, she's also an entrepreneur. She has her own business doing private practice. It's psychotherapy, and she after getting her master's, she went directly into her private practice and started doing that sort of that self-made business. So she was actually very supportive for me. I do know another entrepreneur friend who had parents that were strictly against the idea of entrepreneurship. And we both graduated from the same school, engineering at SFU, at the mechatronics program. So very similar backgrounds. We both went into entrepreneurship roughly around the same time, but this person's parents wanted him to do engineering, wanted him to get the engineering salary, and instead chose to do entrepreneurship, which didn't generate the income, there was a lot of reasons, obviously, but yeah.
I'll just go quickly. Because of my car accident again, my parents were they're actually impressed that I could find the contracts myself and have these connections to fund myself through that. Yeah. So they're kind of used to it.
I guess I'll go next to that question. I was raised by a father who's been an entrepreneur, who was always an entrepreneur. That was his way of, quite honestly, getting out of poverty. So he was very supportive of the idea, if not very encouraging. I think since I was a young girl, anything I would do, he would ask, how do you make a business out of that? It's like, oh, Dad, I want new paints. I'm about 7 years old. And he's like, great. So if we get you paints, that costs you about $5. What are you going to make with that? So I grew up with that kind of mindset. So, my dad was one of the people who really, in the beginning, I would say, was my mentor. And he's also a business consultant that people actually pay for to consult with. So for me, I had the ability to have my dad as a mentor, which wasn't always great either. He also expected me to achieve more and faster. However, with that in mind, I think, the reason you go into entrepreneurship, there's several reasons to go into entrepreneurship. And the reasons my dad went to entrepreneurship and the reasons I did may have been a bit different. And so even though he gave me a lot of advice, his methods weren't necessarily the ones I wanted to adopt. But my mom, on the other hand, didn't want me to go into entrepreneurship because she knew it was going to be grinding and she knew it was going to be hard.
Comments?
I guess maybe I'll go. I grew up, actually, my dad owned the business that I then bought, so we were kind of business partners for a while. So there were lots of issues with that relationship, but none related to him not wanting me to be an entrepreneur. Just sometimes fathers and sons working together is challenging. And in terms of my my wife and my kids, they didn't really exist when I started that all out. So they knew what they were signing up for at some point, I guess. Just the kids, not so much.
To give a different perspective, I'm actually on the other side of the spectrum. Like, my parents are absolutely against me running my own business. They still think that I'm crazy for doing what I do. And my wife and kids, well, when I got married, I was working a job, not an entrepreneur. So it took a small amount of convincing. Mostly it was actually getting my wife to see, hey, look, I can actually make money and it's actually sustainable. And finally she gave in into giving me some leeway to actually run the business and see how it goes. But yeah, happy to chat through that if people have that specific challenge.
Shin,
yeah.
I'm interested to know what your parents' resistance was. Was it just an aversion to risk and maybe having a master plan in mind for you, or what?
Yeah.
What was that?
Coming from a conservative background, my mom is definitely averse to risk. So one of the comments she actually made to me last week is like, why don't you get a government job? Like, you can never get fired if you work for the government, kind of thing. So that was her comment. My dad feels generally, especially when I was going through education, when I was going through high school and university, he was against me going into any business related courses. He felt, hey, you know what, business, you can figure it out on your own. If you're smart, might as well go into sciences. And then once you graduate, then you can decide if you want to go into business. So he's actually a bit more willing to support my entrepreneurial ventures, because I know he wanted to start a restaurant back in the days himself. But seeing that I have a child now and his grandson, I think he's not too supportive of that, and he's looking for more stability in the income side. Yeah. A question from Aaron. How do you follow a passion in your entrepreneurial journey and develop direction? Sorry, is that the right way of saying it? How do you follow a passion in your... maybe Aaron, I'll let you ask the question directly.
Yeah, I'm asking, like, how do you follow your passion in your journey through your entrepreneurialism and create direction? For instance, what's the next step? If you don't know what the next step is, you guys say you're thinking about all the time and you're working all the time. Is this working all the time also trying to come up with concepts in your head of what the next step is, or what the meaning is for your business and the direction it's going in?
I'll answer that in two ways. Yeah, there's a lot of time coming up with new ideas and concepts and directions. Stuff like our co-working business kind of came out of our main business, and that I get really excited about creating new concepts and new ideas and then trying to figure out how to take them to the market. And that's something I've sort of been doing more of in the last few years. But in my case too, like, and I can't speak for anyone else's case, but you start to have more clients and more projects and more staff and more complexity in your business, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of, but I seem to have collected some complexity. So a lot of my thinking is around problem solving and dealing with issues, that none of us ever really want to deal with. And that's everything from, a lot of HR, and I say issues, but just, people are challenging, right? You work with a lot of people. Your clients are going to be challenging, at least in our business. Like, they're spending a lot of money and have a lot of expectations and conflicting priorities. So, a lot of my time is spent solving problems and answering questions.
I have, you go first.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just to answer to that, I think once you get things rolling and business gets going, or even before business gets going, most people who are entrepreneur driven tend to have the running list of ideas. You wake up at 2 in the morning, you have an idea. You're constantly coming up with new ways, innovative ways to solve different things in your business. The key there actually is having a good decision-making process where you're able to prioritize what comes first, what makes the most sense, so that you can sift through those business ideas and try and figure out, what should I be focusing on now? what I see is, and I've experienced myself as an entrepreneur, is that you can get caught into boiling too many pots because they all look great. Because there's once, especially when opportunity starts flowing, you know, I created products where it's like, great, that's a great idea, that's a great product, and you don't want to do too much too fast. The key is focus on the best thing that you can do right now, get that going, and keep a back burner of those great ideas, and test each one, and go through that list. And Chin's great at metrics, I know, and that kind of process. So you know, that's something that I know I've struggled with in the past. I do see a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that, is trying to sift through what's important to be focusing on now.
Thanks for sharing. Maybe I'll move on to the next question. So my natural asking, and I think it's quite related to my next question as well, is two-part. So how long did it take you to generate enough revenue to kind of survive off your business? And the second part is, while you were getting to that point, how did you fund yourself in the start?
I'll start. So my business was running when I bought it, so I didn't start it, but I had to, that was how I funded it, because I had to buy it from the previous owner. So, and they carried that debt. So, you know, I think there's certainly a big opportunity for startup, but there's also a lot of, you know, if anyone on here is really entrepreneurial, there is a huge mass of businesses in the market that are going to have owners that are going to need to retire or get rid of them, and they really have no options. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with finding a business that you can get into and learn and strike a deal where you can buy the owner out, and normally they'll carry that for you and they'll finance it, because they really don't have a lot of options otherwise.
That's a very interesting perspective.
So you're buying it and you're not really putting cash down to buy it. You're sort of, or how are you funding it? Say if you're just coming out of like with this COVID stuff, you're coming out of a job and you're decided, you know what, I want to start a business, but I don't got this great cash flow. How do you go in and try to buy a company when you have no cash flow or nothing to work with?
Yeah. So in my case, and really the circumstances I'm talking about, is you would go work for someone, you'd learn the business, you'd develop a relationship with the owner over a little bit of time, you'd get to know the business. And then at some point they're going to want to retire, or you have a discussion with them about transition. In the way my deal was structured is we agreed to a price, and then the earnings forward basically gave me the cash flow to service that debt. But you know, it's a big risk. Now you're carrying a big bundle, you know, and it doesn't always work out, but yeah, I just throw that out as a, you know, as an alternate too, because I do think that there's a lot of businesses out there that are going to need transition that don't necessarily have it.
So I've had a couple of different businesses, and they all started different ways. When I've started really micro businesses where it was mainly just me solopreneuring it, my business is what funded me. You know, when you're first starting out, that's what I had, like so one of the businesses I started is when the 2008 recession happened, and I had gone back to school, quit my job, gone back to school, and came out of it, and was like, great, there's no jobs in the market. I need to hustle and make it work. So I did several things at the same time to fund me. That being said, one of the best ways to fund your business is to work in the industry. Get it? You can always moonlight your business or work part-time in your business, on your business, but in the industry to help get there. And the reason I say that is a lot of times you fund at least the start of your own business until you get rolling, until you can get funding from other people. So we have what we call love money, which is funding from friends and family, but you still need something to pitch them before you can do that.
Great. Curious on the sales and pricing side. So maybe a two-part question. So one is, do you remember what your first customer experience was like when you first got your first sale or your first customer? And also, how did you come up with pricing? How did you come up with a fair exchange of value?
So for our first product, we developed a wearable LED maze. So it's like a LED wearable. And we went to a Christmas market at SFU in the library area. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like the SFU. It was like the Surrey Christmas Festival. And it was in like 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. But our first sales came from there, and the sales, the first sale, it was a satisfying experience, I would say. Like you put in a lot of work for something like a product, and you always reflect in its value, and you're always stressing over it. But when you make your first sale, it's a sense of accomplishment, and it's a milestone for you that you've gotten this far, and it's only uphill from there. And you could only make one sale for that product, but I think just continuing to move forward is what you need to create that momentum for yourself, and it reflects back to you in your self-confidence and other things. If we're talking about like first sales, like officially for the business, we got our first contract when we started the business, like I would say like 3 or 4 months after registering.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And the same sort of feeling, and it like the feeling doesn't really change when you get more sales. It's just it's like a continual reminder that that you're doing something right, and you want to continue to do that, and it's like a closed loop. It's like a feedback loop. So I don't know if that's the same for yeah.
I'll just echo what Isaac said there. I mean, I think in a few of my businesses, there's something really validating about having created an idea or a product or a service, and then have someone actually be willing to pay you money for it. And once that happens, it's pretty exciting.
Curious to hear, like, how did you guys figure out the initial pricing?
Right.
It was, yeah, I also struggle. I mean, I'm always struggling with pricing. I guess in the beginning, I struggled with pricing just because I felt like for my workshops, for example, I felt like I was overcharging, or even though they were getting specific content, nobody else is doing this for the homeschool communities. It was like a lot of firsts for everything for me. But I basically have a good rule now of taking like tutoring rates for the teacher that goes in, does these workshops, and then like materials cost, travel fees, and any other miscellaneous fees. So it's kind of like a triad package.
Yeah, and for the specific product that I was referring to before, the Christmas market, because it was a handmade product, we factored in the assembly at a specific wage, and we factored in the total landed costs. So say, for example, I ordered PCBs from China. Okay, so I pay for the PCBs, they get shipped here, and that's a landed cost for the PCBs. And then the electrical components I buy from DigiKey, for example, and they have a shipping and a price cost as well. So that as the material cost plus the labor of assembling it, and then you want to determine some sort of profit. So you add a factor to that, and then there you get your product value. So you can it's sort of like a lever. You can move it up and down, and you can change it at whim. Like, for example,
For the larger contract.
Well, yeah, for the larger contracts too, you can set a specific rate for that, or you could estimate a budget. But for the product, it really depends on that lever, like I mentioned, that you can adjust. And you can sort of see a customer in front of you, and you can sort of gauge how they're feeling when they're looking at it, what their specific budget is, I would say, and you can actually adjust the price of the product as long as it doesn't go underneath your basic material and labor costs. It's fine. You can adjust it at your will. So.
I'll give one quick perspective on my end, since I also work on the sales side of things. How I like to advise companies to price is actually to focus more on value creation as opposed to costs. So think about how much money are you saving the person, how much money are you creating the person, or how much time are you saving the person. So that's another way of looking at it as well. I think we'll go to the last question and then we'll wrap up the panel. So I think Manoj is asking a question here. Do you believe it's important to go to university to become an entrepreneur? And what are some of the skills needed to be successful?
I'll start off by saying I did not go to university. I did go to Cap College for 2 years way back in the early 90s. In hindsight, though, I wish I probably had. It would have been, if I were to do it again and I think about my kids, I would want to have a foundational skill set, but I would want to focus my time at university on something that was foundational. And I think that there's some skill sets and some tracks of learning that I think are going to be really portable and valuable moving forward. Stuff like engineering, accounting, some of the basic fundamental items that I think can give you a lot of versatility. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I'll jump into that because I'm on the other side. I did go to university. I did a bachelor's as well as a master's of business management. And while I learned some useful skills in my business classes, I didn't learn how to be an entrepreneur necessarily, even through the entrepreneur class. And most of my colleagues from that business class did not go forward to start their own businesses. The best entrepreneurs I know personally, a lot of them didn't. They dropped out of school. But that's not to say school isn't important if it is for you to acquire the skills that you want. Kind of like what Colby said, like more specific skills like engineering or accounting. However, with the entrepreneurial, I think what's important to be an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, is the willingness to fail, to get up, to fail, to dust your jeans off and to go again, to be fearless in that and to not take rejection personally, but to take it as something to learn. The business that I started, I didn't have much knowledge into. When I started graphic design, I taught myself how to use the software. When I did clothing, I knew nothing about clothing because I didn't go to school for that. My biggest, from my experience, the biggest and best thing I did is I bought a lot of coffees. What I didn't know, I reached out to people fearlessly and said, hey, can I buy you coffee? And will you spend, an hour with me to tell me about what you do and what I need to know? So the biggest takeaway, I think, the skill to be fearless in trying again and again and learning from your trials.
So I do have a bachelor's of science in forestry, but then I got into a car accident and that kind of, I had to start again. So I did end up taking a couple of just college classes for arts and education. And I started with a small group of, I guess, entrepreneurs as well in Surrey, in the same area. And that's how I learned how to navigate, I guess, going through school, being out of work, and then just starting something completely new from scratch. I think that was the best knowledge that I gained, to be honest. Like in school, they don't really teach you much of like how to be in the world as a business. So I'm really, I guess I'm really grateful for the experience that I had over the last 6 years. I don't know, Isaac.
Yeah, for me, I feel kind of strongly here that education in its current form is very institutionalized. So if you take mechatronics, for example, I don't know if they've changed the program since I took it, but there's a clear interest in getting engineers jobs that exist at that specific year. So we'll focus on these specific backgrounds, and then they'll groom us for that, and then we'll graduate to go into those positions. I would say the biggest takeaway from the education was learning how to learn, because it's very much like survival. You have a lot of deadlines. It's very competitive, and you've really got to be on top of things, right? So I think learning how to learn is the biggest takeaway for education in general. I would find that the ethics courses in engineering and the electives that allow you to sort of branch out and sort of experiment with your interests were kind of the biggest motivators for me to try new things. But I don't think education in the way that you think it is completely necessary, because it doesn't really give you the skills and the backgrounds that you would actually need to start a business. Like, there will be capstone projects for engineering, and you'll work with the team and you'll develop a product together, and there will be technical reports and stuff like that. But that you'll only really experience in a larger company if you're going to get hired in one. For an entrepreneurship, all of the skills that you learn are going to be developed by you from the start. And I think you need to take your education in a more personal sense for personal growth and intellectual growth. Find, Tiff Shin was doing, was find people that you can mentor, people that you can get information from and have organic conversations with. Find webinars, read books, be open to a lot of stuff, be humble about your knowledge, and always expect that you won't know everything and you'll need to figure it out. So it's like education isn't this thing that you're going to need and that you got it. It's just a continual process through your entire life that you're going to need. And it's like not a daunting thing. It feels good to learn all this stuff and to become more competent because you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it because it's a requirement. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for sharing so much, and thank you all for taking the time to be on the panel. Last question for all of you is, you can type it out in the chat as I go through the last few slides. How can people connect with you after the session? So LinkedIn, email, whatever detail you can provide, you can put it in the chat box. So I'll quickly address that last question as well, because I think education is a piece that I'm super passionate about while we're waiting for everyone to put their contact info down. Personally, I feel that a lot of people, especially if you're a student, if you're thinking about what courses to take, most of us do it because we think about the potential that the skill will grant us. So we go into, let's say, for example, we see people going into business school because they think, oh, what can I do with a business degree when I have that degree? So we take the skills and then we try to figure out what to do with the skills after. What I really like as an alternate approach is kind of like what Colby was mentioning. You know what your objective or your end goal is, and you go and figure out what skills you need in order to accomplish that vision, and then you go out and pick up those skills instead. So think about it that way, and I think that's a much better way to look at education. If
I can just add one thing to that, I'm looking at this through the hindsight of having been doing this for 20 years, but I've met a lot of lawyers in my life who never worked at lawyers, a lot of accountants who never actually worked as accountants, a lot of engineers who work in construction, but not as engineers. And I think the common thread with a lot of those opportunities is there's some systematic thinking that goes on in some of those practices that I think can give you some hard skills that I wish I had developed earlier on. I think I've always been graced with soft skills. I can manage relationships and work with people, and I can sell stuff, but was sometimes lacking in some of the hard skills. So, I think it is more about the process, the thinking process that goes into some of those. I would add one more thing too, is like when I look back on my life and I look back on my early 20s, you come out of high school, you go into college, university, whatever. And I just remember feeling like I was in such a hurry. Like, I got to get this through. I got to get out. I got to start working. I got to start a business. I got to go work as do whatever. But there's no rush. Don't take 10 years, but I mean, take some time. My advice to someone young would be take some time, learn it. What you're going to end up doing is probably not what you think you're going to end up doing. So, invest in some core skills and some transferable skills and just, start plotting your course from there. Don't be in a rush necessarily.
Great.
Unless you're 35 and living in your parents' basement, then you better start rushing.
Yeah.
Or living in my own basement. Anyhow, good stuff. Just some stuff to wrap it up. Panelists, if you want to dial out, you can dial out if you need to. So if you're interested in more, We have some more upcoming workshops for the next few months. I think the next one coming up, let me quickly look at the notes. They're normally on Wednesdays like this. Next one is April 22nd, so next week, sorry, the week after next, on how to persuade and influence people with words. May 6th, time management and productivity. That one's actually virtual now, not at our mouse. May 13th, startup basics. This is actually in partnership with Startup Grind Richmond. So we'll be covering more detailed on some of the common mistakes that a lot of early entrepreneurs make, how to validate the ideas, things like that. May 20th, we have one on how to write sales emails or emails that people will respond to. So it applies to sales, but also applies to, if you want to write an email to find a job, to find an investor, things like that. So upcoming workshops, you can find that here. I will post the link in the chat as well. Oops. Do Good Business Challenge, I talked about that already. And I'm also launching the Novel Club, which is more of a personal development club if you're interested in more support and more accountability around learning and development. As you know, all the workshops are free. My ask for the crowd is pay what you think it's worth. If you don't have the financial means to actually pay for something like this, then you don't have to. But I do welcome any donations or tips that you can send to me. You can send it through e-transfers. And what I do is all of this goes towards helping me organize more events, planning, development of tools, things like that. And any feedback is welcome. So I will send this link to all of you in an email. If you have any comments, any ideas for how to improve the future sessions, feel free to comment as well. And that's it. You can send me an email if you want a recording of this, and you can connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn through my name. That's it. Thank you all for tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chin.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Right, see you all.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Isaac and Tiffany.
Thank you, everyone.
See all of you, Colby.
All right. I will hang around for a bit if people still have questions.
Thanks, guys.